The cappuccino was still warm when I discovered my wife's secret. 24 hours later, her lawyer was on the phone, legally speaking, begging me not to destroy her. I'm not talking about a messy divorce or a screaming match in the driveway. I'm talking about the kind of leverage that makes attorneys soften their voices and choose words like amicable when they really mean, please don't pull that trigger. The kind where a single email can detonate a career, a marriage, and a corporate department all at once. But let me back up. Have you ever stumbled onto something you wish you could unsee? Not because it was violent or graphic, but because once you saw it, your entire life split into before and after? That's what happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was hunting for a tax document in our shared cloud. One thumbnail preview. One file name. That's all it took. Here's the thing most people don't understand about betrayal. It's not just about broken hearts and broken vows. Sometimes, especially when the other person is your spouse's boss, it's about broken policies, misused corporate funds, and power imbalances that cross legal lines. And if you know where to look, if you know how to document what you find, the affair stops being a private shame and starts becoming a professional liability. So let me ask you, what would you do if evidence fell into your lap by accident? Would you confront immediately? Would you cry, throw things, demand answers? Or would you take screenshots, preserve timestamps, and turn your heartbreak into a case file? I chose the latter. Not because I'm cold, but because I'd worked in compliance before, and I knew that emotion without strategy is just noise. Strategy without emotion, though? That's a scalpel. My wife didn't just cheat. She cheated up with her direct manager, a man who wore $1,000 watches and signed off on her performance reviews. They met at hotels. They filed false expense reports. They thought discretion meant no one would ever connect the dots. They were wrong. Within 24 hours of my discovery, her boss was on administrative leave. The company launched a mandatory ethics review. And her lawyer, the one she'd hired thinking this would be a standard separation, was calling me to negotiate terms, not dictate them. This is the part of the story no one warns you about. The part where justice isn't loud or cinematic. It's quiet, methodical. A trail of evidence that speaks louder than any accusation ever could. If you want to hear stories that teach you what nobody talks about in relationships, the legal landmines, the corporate policies, the moves that actually protect your future, subscribe now. Because what happened next didn't just save my life. It redefined what winning really means. Let's get into it. It started with taxes. Not passion. Not suspicion. Just the mundane task of pulling our most recent tax statement from the cloud before an accountant's deadline. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, coffee cooling beside me. I clicked into our shared drive, scrolled past folders labeled Insurance, Mortgage, Receipts 2024. Then I saw the folder I didn't recognize. It was titled Work, Travel. I hesitated. Lena handled her own business files, but this was in our joint account. I clicked. The screen loaded a grid of thumbnails. My cursor hovered over the first one. A photo. 2 people at a small table. Warm amber lighting from the wall sconces. A hotel bar. I could tell from the generic modern decor, the kind of place that looks identical in every city. The woman's shoulder was angled toward the camera. Blurred, but unmistakable. I knew the slope of that shoulder. I'd rested my head on it 1,000 times. My wife. The man across from her had his hand near hers on the table. Not touching but close. Too close. His beard had flecks of gray, and even through the low resolution, I recognized the expensive watch on his wrist. Fuss. Her boss. I exhaled slowly. My chest felt tight. The file name, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Union. Union Hotel. A 40-minute drive from our apartment. I wasn't looking for proof of an affair. But once you see it, you can't unfind it. And what I did in the next 60 seconds would determine whether I'd be the victim or the one holding all the cards. The room tilted. My pulse hammered in my ears. But somewhere underneath the shock, a switch flipped. It was the same reflex I developed years ago working compliance audits for a mid-sized firm, preserve first, react later. If this ever went legal, I couldn't afford gaps in the record. I couldn't afford accusations of tampering or hearsay. I moved quickly. Screenshot. Timestamp visible in the corner. 3:47 p.m., the current date. I opened the video file next. 32 seconds of footage. Lena laughing. Voss leaning in. Her hand briefly touching his forearm. The audio was muffled, but I caught fragments. No one has to know. And her laugh again, softer this time. Intimate. Screen record. Start to finish. Cursor path included. File properties displayed. Uploaded 3 weeks ago. I saved everything to an external drive. Then I opened the location history on our shared family account, something we'd set up years ago for safety, back when we still trusted each other with everything. I filtered by her device. The map loaded. Dozens of them. Office. Union Hotel. Office again. A boutique 3 blocks from our apartment. One she told me 2 months ago was a supplier meeting. I cross-referenced the dates with my own calendar. The nights she'd said she was working late. The weekends she'd gone in for inventory reconciliation. Every lie had a longitude and latitude. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I sat there with my hands on the keyboard and my breath coming shallow, staring at a trail of evidence that told a story I'd been too blind, or too trusting, to see. 60 seconds. That's how long it took to shift from devastated husband to someone who understood the next move mattered more than the last wound. I opened a new document. Started typing. Date, time, file locations, access logs. Clean sentences. No adjectives. Just facts. I'd been trained to build cases from fragments, to let the data do the talking. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about making sure that when the moment came, and I already knew it would, I wouldn't be the one scrambling for proof. I leaned back in my chair. The coffee had gone cold. My hands were steady. But inside? A volcano waiting to erupt. I just needed to choose the right moment to let it. Let me tell you who Lena was before all this. She worked as an operations manager for a mid-sized e-commerce firm. Smart. Organized. The kind of person who color-coded spreadsheets and never missed a deadline. We'd built a life together that looked stable from the outside. Joint accounts, shared goals, weekend farmers markets. Normal. And Voss? He wasn't just her boss. He was the kind of man who treated his last name like a brand. No first name in emails. Just Voss. Sleek watches that cost more than our mortgage payment. Tailored suits. The type who spoke in TED Talk soundbites and called every meeting a strategic alignment session. Polished. Calculated. The kind of boss who makes you feel like proximity to him is a privilege. I stared at the map again. The location dots formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Office to Union Hotel, 11 visits over 3 months. Office to the boutique on 7th Street, twice. She told me those were supplier meetings. I'd believed her because why wouldn't I? Hotel to a wine bar 2 blocks from Voss's condo. Once, on a Thursday, she'd said she was at a conference. Every lie had a timestamp. Every excuse had coordinates that didn't match. I sat with it for an hour. Just sat there. Didn't scroll further. Didn't call anyone. I let the weight of it settle. Because once you act, you can't take it back. And I needed to be sure about what came next. That's when I remembered the prenup. We'd signed it 6 years ago, back when we were younger and practical in a way that felt almost clinical. A lawyer had suggested it during the house purchase. Just in case, she'd said, as if marriage was a business transaction that needed contingency clauses. We'd laughed about it. Added an infidelity clause mostly as a symbolic gesture. We'll never need this, Lena had said, squeezing my hand across the table. The clause was simple. If either party engaged in proven infidelity, the offending spouse would waive claim to a portion of joint assets and forfeit a percentage of home equity. We'd called it our trust insurance. A dusty paragraph buried in a file drawer. Until now. I pulled the document from our records. Read it twice. The language was clean, enforceable. Clear and convincing evidence. I had timestamps. Location logs. Video. Screenshots. A trail that connected her lies to verifiable data. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was someone with leverage. And here's the thing nobody tells you about prenups. They're not just about protecting assets. They're about protecting your ability to walk away with dignity when trust gets shattered. If you've ever wondered why prenups matter, hit that like button. And drop a comment. Do you think infidelity clauses are fair? Or are they too harsh? Because what I was holding in my hands wasn't just a contract. It was a loaded weapon. And I was about to decide whether to use it. I didn't go to bed that night. I took a pillow and a blanket to the couch. Not as a statement. Not to be dramatic. I just couldn't lie next to her and pretend I didn't know. Pretending takes energy I didn't have. At 11:43 p.m., I sent an email to my attorney. Subject line: urgent, marital issue, documentation attached. The body was 4 sentences. No accusations. No emotion. Just metadata logs, file timestamps, and a request for guidance on next steps. I included summaries, not the raw footage. Facts in sequence. Then I hit send and stared at the ceiling until the sky turned gray. Morning came too fast and too slow. I made coffee. French press. The ritual of it kept my hands busy. Grind the beans. Boil the water. Pour it. The kitchen smelled normal, like nothing had shattered the night before. At 8:14 a.m., Lena came out of the bedroom. She was wearing the navy dress. The one she always wore to important meetings. Hair pulled back. Makeup precise. She looked ready for battle, or maybe just ready to pretend everything was fine. She didn't look at me. Are we out of oat milk? That's what she said. Not, good morning. Not, we need to talk. Just a question about oat milk, like this was any other Tuesday, like I hadn't spent the night on the couch with evidence of her affair saved to 3 separate drives. It was the little lie on top of the big one. The audacity of pretending normalcy when the floor had already caved in. I set my mug down. I saw the Union Hotel video. The words came out soft. But they hit like a freight train. Her shoulders collapsed. Not all at once. Just a slow deflation, like air leaking from something that had been holding its shape too long. She gripped the counter. Didn't turn around. I can explain. Then explain. She did. Slowly. Haltingly. How it had started as late nights at the office. How Voss had been charming, persistent. How the lines blurred after a product launch celebration. How she hadn't meant for it to go this far. How it felt uninvited at first, but then, she trailed off. I didn't interrupt. Didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, holding my coffee, letting her words fill the space between us. When she finished, I asked one question. Was it consensual? She looked at me then. Eyes red but dry. Yes. That word, kiss, burned away the last bit of doubt. And with it, any hesitation about what I had to do next. Not because I wanted revenge, but because yes meant she'd made a choice. A series of them. It wasn't coercion. It wasn't a mistake in a moment of weakness. It was deliberate, repeated, calculated enough to involve hotels, expense reports, and lies that stacked on top of each other like cards in a house that was always going to fall. I nodded. Okay. Okay, she repeated, voice breaking. That's it. What do you want me to say, Lena? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I'm sorry. I believed her. I think that's what hurt the most. She was sorry. Sorry it got discovered. Sorry it got messy. Maybe even sorry it happened. But sorry doesn't rewind time. It doesn't undo the dots on a map or erase the video file or change the fact that she'd chosen him over us. Over me. I poured the rest of my coffee into the sink. I need you to leave for a few days. She didn't argue. And I didn't watch her pack. After Lena left, I called my attorney again. This time, it wasn't about the prenup. It was about process. Because if I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. Chain of custody, she said. Everything you've collected needs to stay clean. Don't access anything you're not authorized to view. Keep all communications in writing. If this goes legal, we can't afford gaps or questions about how you obtained evidence. I understood. But there was something else I'd realized while staring at those location logs. This isn't just a marital issue, I said. It's a workplace issue. She paused. Explain. Lena's boss. Her direct manager. They were involved in an undisclosed relationship. That's a policy violation at most companies. And if they were using corporate funds to facilitate it, hotels, dinners, travel, that crosses into expense fraud. I could hear her pen moving across paper. Do you have proof of corporate expenditures? Yes. I pulled up our shared credit card history. Filtered by date. There it was, a $278 charge from Union Hotel, dated a Tuesday in March. The memo line? Client hospitality. But I'd checked Lena's work calendar that week. No client meetings. No external events. Just an internal ops review that ended at 4 p.m. The hotel charge posted at 8:47 p.m. Send me what you have, my attorney said. But don't submit anything to her employer yet. Let me review it first. By 10:30 a.m., she'd called back with a green light. At noon, I opened the company's website and found their ethics hotline. Anonymous reporting option available. I clicked through. The form was straightforward. Incident type: conflict of interest/undisclosed relationship. Date range: January, April. Individuals involved: operations manager, director of sales operations. No names. Just titles. I attached 3 files. 1. A timeline with dates and locations. Office, hotel, boutique. No commentary. Just coordinates and timestamps. 2. A screenshot of the corporate expense report showing the Union Hotel charge categorized under client hospitality on a date with no external client engagement scheduled. 3. A copy of the company's own policy handbook, section 4.7, romantic or familial relationships between employees in a direct reporting structure must be disclosed to human resources within 10 business days. Failure to disclose may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. I didn't write a single adjective. I didn't accuse anyone of being manipulative or unethical. I didn't need to. The facts did the work. The email body was 2 sentences. Attached documentation suggests a potential conflict of interest and misuse of corporate funds. Request review per company policy 4.7 and expense guidelines outlined in the employee handbook. I didn't add a moral to the story. The email didn't need one. I hit submit at 12:14 p.m. Then I sat back and exhaled. This is where most people get it wrong. They lead with emotion and lose with evidence. They scream, threaten, make accusations that can't be proven. But emotion without structure is just noise. Evidence with precision? That's a wrecking ball. If this story is teaching you something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because we break down the psychology and the strategy behind every story. This isn't just drama. It's a masterclass in protecting yourself when the person you trusted most decides to blow up your life. I didn't know it yet, but that one email was about to detonate Lena's entire world. And her boss's career. Not because I'd been cruel. Not because I'd lied or exaggerated. But because I'd done something most people don't think to do when their hearts are breaking. I'd treated betrayal like a compliance audit. And compliance audits don't care about feelings. They care about facts, policies, paper trails. Within hours, the machinery would start moving. HR would open a case file. Investigators would pull records. Voss would get a call. Lena would be summoned. And I'd be the one who set it all in motion with nothing more than timestamps and a $278 hotel charge. Cold. Calculated. Precise. And completely justified. After I submitted the report, the first hour was silence. Complete silence. I made lunch. Reheated leftover pasta. Ate it standing at the counter. The apartment felt bigger without her in it. Emptier. Like the walls had shifted outward when she left. Hour 2, still nothing. I cleaned the kitchen. Wiped down counters. Loaded the dishwasher. Normal tasks that made the waiting feel less suffocating. My phone sat face up on the table. Screen dark. Hour 3, the call started. Unknown numbers. 4 of them in 20 minutes. I didn't answer. If it was important, they'd leave a message. If it was Lena calling from someone else's phone, I wasn't ready. The voicemails were silent. Just dead air and a click. At 4:20 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text. From Lena. HR wants to talk to me now. No punctuation at the end. No question mark. Just a statement, flat and heavy. I stared at the message for a full minute before I typed back. Okay. One word. What else was there to say? I set the phone down. Opened my laptop. Tried to work on a project that had been sitting unfinished for weeks. The cursor blinked at me. I typed 2 sentences. Deleted them both. At 6:03 p.m., another text. They've put Voss on leave pending investigation. This time there was more. A longer message that came through in pieces. They asked about expenses. About disclosures. About the hotel. They know everything. How could you do this? I read the last line 3 times. How could you do this? As if I was the one who'd lied. As if I was the one who'd filed false expense reports and met her boss in hotel bars while I was at home thinking she was working late. I didn't respond. The phone stayed quiet after that. She didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. I assumed she went to a friend's place or maybe a hotel. Ironic, considering. I didn't ask. Didn't check her location. That part of my life, the part where I tracked her movements and cared where she slept, felt like it belonged to someone else now. I stayed in the quiet. The hum of the refrigerator. The distant wail of sirens moving through the city streets below. A neighbor's dog barking 2 floors up. Sounds I'd heard 1,000 times but never really noticed until the silence around them became so loud it pressed against my chest. I sat on the couch with the lights off, staring at nothing. There was satisfaction, a grim, cold kind of satisfaction knowing that my email had worked. That the machinery had started moving exactly the way I'd anticipated. That Voss's polished veneer was cracking under the weight of an ethics investigation he never saw coming. But there was something else too. Hollowness. Because no matter how justified I was, no matter how precise my strategy or how clean my evidence, I was still sitting alone in an apartment that used to be ours. Still sleeping on a couch in a home that suddenly felt like a waiting room. 24 hours. That's how long it took for an affair to collapse an entire corporate department. For a manager to lose his position. For my wife's career to hang by a thread. But I wasn't done yet. Because the next morning her lawyer was going to call. And that's when everything would shift again. At 9 a.m. the next morning, exactly 24 hours since I'd confronted Lena in the kitchen, my phone lit up. Not a text. A call. The number displayed a name I recognized. Kensington & Fell. High-end firm. The kind that charges $600 an hour and doesn't take walk-ins. Lena had mentioned them once when a coworker faced an employment dispute. She'd said they were the best. I let it ring twice before I answered. Mr. Hale? The voice was professional. This is Marla Ortiz. I'm an attorney with Kensington & Fell, and I'm representing your wife, Lena Hale. Do you have a few minutes to speak? Her tone was steady, but there was something underneath it. Controlled urgency. The kind of voice you use when you're holding a bad hand but trying to negotiate like you're not. I have time, I said. Thank you. I'm reaching out to see if we can discuss an amicable path forward. I let the word sit between us for a beat. Amicable. Yes, she said quickly. I understand this is a difficult situation for everyone involved. But I believe we can resolve this in a way that protects both parties without further escalation. I didn't respond. Silence is a negotiation tool. Let them fill the gap. She did. Your report to the company's ethics hotline triggered a mandatory review. As you're likely aware, there are now concerns about corporate expense misuse and undisclosed relationships between employees in a direct reporting structure. We understand you have extensive documentation. There was the acknowledgement. She continued, her words measured and careful. My client does not dispute the relationship. She accepts full responsibility for her actions, both personal and professional. What we're hoping, is that this matter can be handled privately between the two of you, rather than escalating into additional legal claims. Additional claims, I repeated. The infidelity clause in your prenuptial agreement, she said. We're aware of its existence. And we're aware that the evidence you've gathered would likely satisfy the burden of proof required to enforce it. I stayed quiet. Mr. Hale, my client is devastated by how this has unfolded. She understands she's hurt you. She understands the professional consequences she's now facing. But she's asking, respectfully, that you don't pursue the punitive provisions outlined in the prenup. She's prepared to sign a fair settlement. She's prepared to accept fault. She's asking for some measure of grace. Interesting word choice. And if I don't? I asked. Marla hesitated. Just for a second. Then we proceed through the courts. It will be public. It will be expensive. And it will take months, possibly years, to resolve. No one wins in that scenario, Mr. Hale. Not you. Not her. Not even the company, which is now facing its own internal reckoning. She paused. Then her voice softened. I'm asking you, on my client's behalf, not to pursue the full extent of the infidelity clause or file additional claims. Please. Please. That one word changed the entire conversation. Begging for mercy wasn't tears and theatrics. It wasn't Lena showing up at my door with apologies and flowers. It was a lawyer, someone trained to argue, to push, to win, choosing humility because the facts were a blade pointed the wrong way. I leaned back in my chair. 24 hours ago, I'd been the one sitting in shock, staring at a thumbnail of my wife in a hotel bar. But I was the one holding every card. The prenup, the corporate investigation, the documented lies, the expense fraud. I had leverage I'd never asked for. But leverage is only useful if you know what to do with it. I could destroy her. Financially. Professionally. I could invoke every clause in that prenup and walk away with the house, the accounts, and the satisfaction of knowing she'd lost everything. But what would that cost me? I'll consider your request, I said. But I have conditions. Of course, Marla said, relief creeping into her tone. We're prepared to negotiate in good faith. I'll send a list to my attorney by end of day. We'll schedule a meeting. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Truly. I hung up, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something other than grief or rage. I felt power. Quiet. Controlled. Not through yelling or ultimatums, but through evidence, process, and knowing exactly when to stay silent. By end of day, I'd sent my list to my attorney. 3 demands. Non-negotiable. First, a clean financial separation with a buyout of my share in the home. Not the harshest outcome the prenup allowed. I wasn't interested in leaving her with nothing, but enough to reflect the intent behind the clause we'd signed. Fair but not forgiving. Second, a written acknowledgement that no joint funds had been used to subsidize the affair. Any corporate reimbursements tied to hotel stays or dinners with Voss would be repaid by Lena or the company. I didn't care who cut the check. I just wanted it on record. Third, counseling. For both of us. Together or separately, I didn't know yet. But ruptures this deep don't heal by themselves. And I wasn't walking away without at least trying to understand how we'd gotten here. 2 days later, my attorney called. They've accepted all 3 terms, she said. Marla Ortiz said, and I quote, "We can do that. Thank you." I heard the rustle of paper through the phone. An exhale. Relief from their side. But on mine, I didn't feel victorious. I felt something steadier. Something quieter. Because justice isn't a gavel crashing down. It's not revenge or public humiliation. Sometimes, it's just timestamps and process. Emails written without a single extra adjective. Facts that speak louder than anger ever could. Here's what I learned in those 24 hours. Document everything, legally. Evidence beats emotion every time. If I hadn't taken screenshots, if I hadn't preserved metadata, this would have been a he said she said nightmare. Emotion is valid, but strategy wins. I was devastated. Furious. Heartbroken. But I didn't let those feelings dictate my next move. I let them fuel my precision. Workplace affairs have consequences beyond the personal. When your spouse cheats with their boss, it's not just infidelity. It's a policy violation. A professional liability. Know the difference. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. I could have pursued the full prenup clause and left her with nothing. But boundaries aren't about destruction. They're about drawing a line that says, this far, no further. You can demand accountability without seeking vengeance. Mercy and justice can coexist. You don't have to choose between being a victim and being a villain. You can be someone who holds the truth carefully and lets it do its work. What would you have done? Would you have shown mercy or pursued the full prenup clause? Comment below. And if this story made you think differently about relationships, betrayal, or justice, subscribe. We're building a community that doesn't just watch drama unfold, we learn from it. 24 hours. That's all it took for an affair to collapse a career, a marriage, and a carefully constructed lie. But it's also all it took for truth to do its quiet work. And sometimes, that's the strongest weapon you'll ever hold.